Hello, and thank you for joining me. My name is Zach, or A Warrior, here with Treadmill Gaming, and this is my Mythic Dungeon Guide to the Theater of Pain. This is maybe my favorite dungeon of this particular expansion, only eclipsed by one other, which I also think is quite good. This one has a lot of gimmicky fights. It kind of reminds me of the Storm Stout Brewery, if you remember that dungeon from Mists of Pandaria. Well, right up front, our first fight here is the Affront of Challengers. This is a combination of 3 bosses who do not share a health pool, and when they fall below 40% health, they each have a specific enrage. The recommended kill order that I have consistently found on this particular fight is Sathel, Desia, and then Parsian. The reason why is that Sathel is kind of difficult because they put up a 30% health shield and become uninterruptible while their shield lasts. Desia is bad to fight last because when she fixates, she picks a random target and uses all of her abilities while she's fixated, whereas Parsian is sort of the general nuisance character. And one important thing to note is that if you have the ability Soothe, you can change the kill order to pretty much any order you want, because Desia is the one that you need to really focus on soothing, because she will fixate on a target and make it rather hard to chase after and kill them there. You might see here that we had a bit of challenge with this fight. This was a group of people who had never done this fight before, so we ended up having to take sort of a long route to get this boss fight done with, but that's okay. The important thing is that we got it done. Of course, keeping up your tank basics on this fight is pretty helpful, very important. Be sure to keep your shield block and mitigation abilities up. Nothing here is overwhelming. There's no ability that's going to especially crunch your tank other than standing in the bad, so try to avoid doing that if you can. After you defeat the Affront of Challengers, you have a couple of options. You can go one of 3 directions in whichever order you choose. You see a lot of tanks using this as an opportunity to pick the boss they want to get some gear from and then ditching the dungeon, but hopefully we'll see a lot less of that in Mythic. But it is a plague a lot of my friends have complained about in heroic difficulty. Well, the first boss I like to go for is Zav the Unfallen. He's sort of a gladiator boss, and right before you get the opportunity to fight him, you have to fight a couple of gladiators right beforehand. They have a couple of abilities you might want to look into interrupting and dealing with. There's an ability called Battle Trance. It's no good. It surrounds the caster with a shield and increases their attack speed, so you definitely want to interrupt that if you can make it. Other than that, though, these enemies aren't too difficult, just a little bit of flavor before you get to the boss. If you have a Necrolord in your party, you can actually get 10% versatility for about 5 minutes, I think, by activating the banners at the end of the hallway. Each one of these 3 pathways has one of these banners that gives you a little versatility and movement speed. I believe that captain there has the ability to cast a Demoralizing Shout, but has a cast timer, so if you can help it, be sure to interrupt it. Now, this fight is a little more fun for DPS than it is for tanks, but it's still pretty fun for tanks. You have one primary mechanic, and that is when these banners pop up, you want to hard focus them and destroy them as quickly as possible. These banners, when planted, reduce your movement speed every 3 seconds while they persist, so you get progressively slower. After he's planted the banner, he'll shortly start casting room-wide AoE attacks that get very difficult to dodge if you don't have enough movement speed. We in the tanking business like to call this a dance combo. He will do one of 3 moves in a random order, sort of a dance you just have to get used to doing. During this fight, he'll pick 2 DPS and make them fight each other. I'm not exactly sure how that fight goes because I've never been picked for it, but my understanding is the winner of the duel walks away with a 10% damage bonus, while the loser walks away with 10% reduced damage, but you both come back up with, I think, the same health you were tossed in with, so not too much to worry about overall. Just a fun, flavorful fight, and my rogue friend lives for the PvP portion of this particular fight. After you take care of him, you have 2 choices. I generally like to go for Gore Chop next, here in the Barrow of Carnage. This is a stitchwork and patchwork portion of this dungeon. The enemies here like to explode, leave little poison trails behind when they die, so be sure to sort of spread them out as you're tanking and don't pile them all up on the caster or anything like that, otherwise you'll probably have a couple of deaths. There are a couple of abilities you'll want to watch out for here. Specifically, the blighted sludge spewers. They cast a withering discharge which can be interrupted. This particular pull can be a little surprising if you don't know it's coming, but a bunch of enemies will jump off of the walls and those enemies do explode, so be sure to be prepared for a lot of area taken up in this little tiny hallway. My personal joke for fighting against Gorchop is I like to put on the song Megalovania as I fight him. As you can see here, while you're fighting him, these little hooks drop, and you have to avoid them while fighting. Gorchop hits the tank fairly hard. Keep your mitigations and damage reductions up as much as possible, especially for Hateful Strike, which will chunk you pretty good. Now on Mythic 0, getting hit by one of these meat chunks, as you see me do here, I think 2 times, isn't too bad, but I imagine on higher Mythic keys it will be pretty much a death sentence, so get good at dodging them now. They come down in a fairly predictable pattern with 2 gaps with 2 enemies inside of them, and then right behind those gaps you'll see another little wall in the same area. You can get out of it pretty easily if you know how it's coming. Gorchop will also occasionally pull all players to his location with his meat hooks and then cast Tenderizing Smash. Obviously, get away from it when he starts doing that. Finally, we have Kolthrak. The boss itself isn't very interesting, but its mobs right beforehand do require some doing. As you can see, when you enter this room, there are a bunch of swirly bits getting cast on the ground while a bunch of enemies slow you down. It's best just to run through as quickly as possible, tagging as many enemies and pulling them into that doorway so they can get AoE'd down. Defeat this next enemy to grab his portal ball, put it in the right slot, and then go in the portal, fight the enemies. Keep on going along. Try and tank these mobs directly in the center, not too far left or right, or you'll pull additional unnecessary mobs. Put it in the right slot again and keep on going. The Soul-Forged Bone Reaver here doesn't do a lot of damage, but is kind of scary and does spin around, so try not to pull him into your caster, your healer, or anything like that. This mob is actually one of the most deadly in the whole dungeon. He casts a tornado, which, if you're not careful, will shoot out and push back and knock back anybody that it hits. So be sure to not get hit by that tornado, as it will just knock you off the side of the cliff and kill you. Koltharak's main mechanic is a DPS mechanic called Draw Soul, which he casts on 2 players at the same time. If the ability is cast on you, you have a little bit of time to touch your soul NPC that's running around the boss arena. You're going to want to watch out for the little grasping hands because they will root you for 10 seconds, but those hands will also grasp your soul, so it can be kind of advantageous to herd your soul into those little hands if you can, but if you can just grab it as quickly as you possibly can. Catching your soul does give you a little damage increase, and if you don't catch your soul, you get mind controlled and your party will have to DPS you. Usually ends up in you being killed. The other major mechanic is Phantasmal Parasite, which just needs to be dispelled by the healer. Not much for you to worry about as a tank here. Just try to make sure that everybody can hit the boss and that you're not standing in any of those grasping hands. This boss doesn't hit too hard. This is mostly a mechanics-centered DPS fight. Our final boss is Mordretha. Mordretha is pretty easy on normal and heroic difficulties, but on Mythic difficulties, she gets a couple more mechanics that make her notably more difficult. First of all, she has a chunking, very damaging move called Reaping Scythe that deals quite a bit of magic and physical damage, so be sure to have some mitigation up for that when it's about to hit you. And then she also occasionally will cast an ability called Dark Devastation, where she'll channel a beam that pushes players back. Be prepared to dodge that, get out of the way, get behind her as fast as you can, because it will hurt and it will also displace you, which as the fight goes on becomes more and more dangerous to deal with. Occasionally she will use an ability called Manifest Death. She inflicts a dot on all players, and at the end of the dot, they explode, and a summon will be summoned on each of the players. The high-level technique for this particular ability, Manifest Death, is to get as close together without overlapping your circles. It's pretty difficult, so I wouldn't count on pugs to do it for you, but if you're in a Discord group, try and get as close together without overlapping those circles so that your tank can grab all the adds as quickly as possible. You can also see that she casts Grasping Rift, an ability that will grab you and start pulling you towards a corner of the room. If you get pulled into that corner, you get stunned and start taking big damage, so don't let that happen to you. It will result in your death. Run against the pull. At 50% health, she gets sort of an enrage and casts an ability called Echoes of Carnage, which does a couple of things. Echo of Battle is a simple dodge where a bunch of swirls will appear on the ground and you gotta get out of the way, and Ghostly Charge, which is an incredibly powerful series of ghostly riders charging across the battlefield here. You have to dodge them. If you don't, they will kill you. They are very strong. That attack is very, very hard hitting. Overall, I think this dungeon is incredibly fun. I hope you enjoy it as well. Once again, my name is Zach, or a warrior with Treadmill Gaming. If you'd like to join me for some World of Warcraft, some Twitch streaming, and chit-chatting about this, that, and the other, you can join me every night at 8 p.m. Central Time on twitch.tv. I'll have the link in the description for you. Thank you for joining me, and good luck out there.